Hey guys, it's Kamikaze Studios here, and today's video is going to be a little different. As some of you may or may not know from watching the vlogs, recently I fractured my foot and cannot put any weight on it at all. Now, of course, I wanted to go to Great Adventure for Holiday in the Park opening weekend because I had to get the content for you guys, so we decided the best way to do that was to put me in a wheelchair and wheel me around the park. So, doing this definitely gave me a very different perspective and look at the park when experiencing it from a perspective of being in a wheelchair. So in this video, I want to go over what it's like to go to Great Adventure in a wheelchair, all the good, all the bad, everything you need to know. So first things first, going in, I did not have an ADA pass ready to go. If you don't know what an ADA pass is, basically that's that blue ticket you see a lot of people with that allows them to basically go up the exit and skip the whole line to get on rides quick. The system tends to be very heavily abused, and personally I didn't want to use it because I don't like cutting the line, so I just figured we'd do whatever we could with getting me up the ramps, and whatever rides had stairs, I would go up the exit ramp because that's the only way I could get on, and rides that had no stairs in the queue, I'd just go through the regular queue or use skip the line passes. So I did not have an ADA pass, and a big reason for that as well is because you couldn't go to the park without doing the thing online. There's a whole form online you have to fill out 48 hours prior to your visit, and the injury was recent enough that I wasn't able to do it with enough time for my visits on Friday and Saturday, so we wound up just going to the park with no ADA pass and seeing how it would go. But in the future, I do plan on getting an ADA pass just because it's a lot easier to go up the exit ramp with the wheelchair, because even that's a struggle, as you'll see later on in the video. So first and foremost, going into the park, we do park in the preferred lot since we have Diamond Elite memberships, so it definitely makes it a lot easier to get up there. When you get to security, it was a little inconsistent. The first day they had us go through secondary screening and they just pushed me through the metal detector after I emptied my pockets. But then the other day we went through, of course it beeped, and the guy said if you don't have a bag you're good to go. So we just went. So it's a little inconsistent there. Personally, I'd rather just be able to go right through. I think that was a lot easier. So the second day it was definitely a little better. Going up to the gates, it was a very smooth experience. They opened up the stroller gate, rolled in, scanned my pass, and went through. Very simple and easy. Then going through the park itself, I noticed a lot about the way the park is structured. So certain pavements throughout the park are definitely a lot rougher on the wheelchair than they are walking. You can definitely feel the difference. A lot of the older concrete with the rocks in it definitely gave a bit of a rougher ride as opposed to the newer concrete that's much smoother, or even some of the asphalt. A lot of the pavers weren't too terrible either. I did notice that a lot of the curbing in Main Street wasn't really set up too well for a wheelchair. There were openings, but they were kind of narrow, so you typically feel a bit of a bump when going up into them, but that's really just a small nitpick, nothing too bad. Now, going into rides themselves, there are properly marked ADA entrances for all the rides. You'll see a little wheelchair icon next to where you can enter for the ride. So say you want to go on a ride like Batman, obviously you have to go up the exit ramp because the Flash Pass and main queue have stairs, and you can't do that with a wheelchair. Then you have a ride like Justice League where the handicap entrance is marked at the Flash Pass line or the regular line because there is no stairs in the queue. So it really is ride dependent on where you enter, but they all have those handicap accessible signs, which I think is very good. Of course, I know what rides do and do not have stairs in the queue, so I was able to figure that out pretty easily. But for someone who doesn't go to the park as much as I do, that is definitely some very helpful signage. Now, I heard a couple different situations and scenarios from the people who work at the park as to how the whole boarding process works. So on certain rides, like Wonder Woman for example, the operators had me sit the furthest right since my right foot is the one that's injured. That way nobody was sitting next to me on that side. That way no one could accidentally kick my foot or anything like that. Same situation on Joker. They had me sit on the far right side facing forwards. That way no one could kick my foot, which definitely I didn't even think of that. So that was very smart on their part to have that all worked out. There were a couple rides I didn't ride, the biggest one being Jersey Devil, just because I know Jersey Devil puts a lot of stress on your feet, just the way the seating situation is, and I didn't want to risk it. I did ride Batman. Batman was the one ride that was a little tricky for me. In some of the transitions, I definitely felt some jolts, and they went right to my foot, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be riding Batman for the rest of the year, but all the other rides were fairly manageable. With the injury I have, they weren't painful at all, they were fun, and the ride operators, of course, were very accommodating. And it was all just a very smooth, great experience. Park the wheelchair either in the station or off to the side, you board, and it's a very simple process. However, getting on some of those rides definitely is a little tricky. For example, Wonder Woman, the exit path is very tight for a wheelchair. The entrance and flash pass, the main entrance and flash pass, their queues are too narrow to take a wheelchair through, so we had to go through the exit, and even then it was very tricky to maneuver the wheelchair through those switchbacks. They were kind of tight. Same can be said at Nitro. That was probably the most difficult one. Going up that exit ramp, there really is not enough room for a wheelchair to be going one way and people exiting the ride to be going the other way. So it was always a big process trying to get on Nitro. That's why I didn't ride it too much, just because it was very difficult to get the wheelchair up that ramp. I think if the park implemented elevators like you could see at some of the Cedar Fair parks, I think that would definitely help big time. That way you can keep people off the ramps, they have stairs that they can go down, and then people who are handicapped would just go up the elevator and make it a much quicker and easier process for all parties. I know Green Lantern is one of the only rides in the park that has both exit stairs and exit ramp. Of course, I didn't ride Green Lantern because it's not open for Holiday in the Park this year, but I think even if they just had stairs and ramps separately, that way people that are in a wheelchair could go up the ramp and not deal with oncoming traffic. I think that would definitely make the process a lot easier and less frustrating for both parties. Now when it comes to getting food or drink, I noticed a couple interesting things at the park. The coolest thing I saw that I never even realized until I was in the wheelchair was that they actually have a wheelchair mode for the Coke Freestyle machines that are located in Yum Yum. You can see in this video here, there's a little button with a wheelchair on it, and you press that, and then it brings up a menu where you can use buttons that are on the machine itself to navigate through the screen and get to the drink you want. It's definitely a slow process and it's a little glitchy. I had to take off my gloves so that I could properly read my inputs, but it was definitely nice to see that they implemented that much better than trying to reach all the way up to the screen to tap the drink. It was very, very simple to do, and I was really happy to see that that accommodation was made. Getting food, of course, reaching over the counter is a little tricky, but the employees were very nice about it and very accommodating and went out of their way to help, which was always really, really nice to see. Restrooms were definitely interesting as well. Personally, I opted to just leave my wheelchair outside the restroom and go walk in because it wasn't really that far of a distance, but usually the handicap stalls that they have that are wheelchair accessible are occupied by people who aren't handicapped, so typically you'll just kind of have to work around that. Like I said though, I didn't bring it in there, I just walked in because I found that a little easier, but just keep that in mind that a lot of times the ADA accessible stalls will not be available because people just tend to use them, so just keep that in mind if you are in a wheelchair. But overall, the experience of going to Great Adventure in this state definitely gave me a new outlook on how people who are in a wheelchair all the time have to experience the park. I know most people, when they break a bone, their first instinct isn't to go to Great Adventure, but me being me, I had to go, and to see that the park was able to make the accommodations and they were already present was definitely great to see. Of course, there are things that could be improved, like I said in the video, but I'm sure that's the case everywhere. And overall, I hope you guys take away from this video that people in wheelchairs or people that have a disability, they have to experience the park in a very different way than people who don't have a disability. And just be mindful of that, be a little more patient because it takes a little longer to get out of the wheelchair and go and do certain things. But something I really took away from this is that the whole ADA pass system is something that can be very difficult to set up for people who actually have a disability, but also very easy for someone who doesn't have a disability to take advantage of and use, which I think is pretty unfortunate. Like I said, the system they have set up is definitely pretty functional and well done. I just wish it was a little easier for someone who actually has a disability to be able to get the pass. I know a lot of operators were telling us to just go to guest relations, but as far as I know, you need to fill out the form online prior to going to guest relations, and I haven't gotten a doctor's note or anything. I just have the x-ray that my foot is fractured, so from that perspective, I think that could definitely be improved on. I mean, if you're in a cast and you have the x-rays, I think that should be more than enough to have to get an ADA pass, whereas other people can very easily just fake a doctor's note and get the pass no problem. I think that's very unfortunate that people take advantage of the system like that, but nothing I can do about it. I can just share my thoughts on it, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it was a little different than usual. I wanted to share this different perspective on how the park can be experienced from someone who can't walk around and is stuck in a wheelchair. I hope this was interesting for you guys. If it was, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye, guys.